Thanks for showing up to learn a little bit more about employees and independent contractors. So a couple of things that I think are important here, I want to make sure we touch on as we're going through this. One is to understand the difference between an employee and a contractor and what the implications are of improperly classifying them. So you want to make sure you know who's an employee, who's a contractor, and then how to appropriately deal with each of those workers. And then you become a little bit more familiar with how you might go about classifying someone who you could be bringing on to your business to help you in some form or fashion. So as Tiffany mentioned, I'm John Rabil. I own Launch, which is a law firm. We do small business legal solutions a little bit differently. We help businesses sort of, as general counsel, recognizing risk and avoiding issues. So, I do deal with employees and independent contractors in my own business. So I have some firsthand experience with this as well. And generally, I'm an advisor to small businesses. In particular, this is an issue that I work closely with and often with, helping businesses sort of navigate around this. All right, so contractor versus employee. What's the difference between a contractor and employee? So on a high level, an employee is someone who works in your business and you control. A contractor is a third party individual or company who provides some sort of service to your business. You operate under a contract or services agreement, what have you, and essentially you don't control them. So control is a big thing when it comes to how you handle employees and contractors. And so we can spend some time really on how you properly classify workers. I think there's a lot of moving parts here. Oftentimes, small businesses in particular want to bring on independent contractors for every worker that they use. That's sort of their go-to default setting. They need some help with anything. I'm going to bring on a contractor in order to help me. And the sort of prevailing thought is if I want them to be a contractor and they agree to be a contractor, everything's fine. Then they're an independent contractor and there's nothing to worry about. That's not the case as far as the government, state and federal, is concerned. It's irrelevant that you and your worker may want to be in an independent contractor relationship. You have to classify that worker based on laws and regulations. And if you don't do it properly, there's some penalties or repercussions, which we'll get into later. But so it's important from the outset, I think, when you're determining that you need some help, to think about how you're going to classify the worker that comes in. Are they going to be an employee? Are they going to be an independent contractor? And what's your process for making sure you classify them correctly? And so you want to think about, for starters, control. This is the part that I think stops most workers from being classified as independent contractors. If you're going to have control over when this person does their job, how they do their job, they're almost certainly going to be an employee. There's not going to be much you can do to classify them as an independent contractor. So employees typically work under the direction and control of the company. Bottom line, independent contractors sort of have more control over when they're getting work done, how they're doing the work. It's more that they have contracted to provide some service or what have you by a certain deadline. And as long as they're getting it done, you can't control when they do it or how they do it. It's like one example that's always used is you hire someone to cut your grass. If you're going to tell them when to do it, exactly how to do it, like it's got to be diagonal with a design in the yard, you're putting too much control on that person. They're an employee. If you hire them and they cut it whenever they want, however they want, as long as it's cut, then that person's a contractor. So control is the first big thing to think about when you're bringing on a worker. How much are you going to control them? How much do you need to control them in order for them to do the job that you want them to do? So the couple things to consider around the behavioral side of it. A lot of times employees are actively managed. You're training them. You're giving them specific instructions when, where, how to get things done. The flip side of that is an independent contractor is usually someone or some company that provides a specific skill, has a specialty. You're bringing them in to get that work done for you. They're the one with the expertise, and more likely they know how to get it done. You just need a certain result from them. So there's financial considerations or financial control. And what that means is, usually employees are reimbursed for expenses. They may receive some benefits from the company, whether that be time off, health benefits, all of those types of things. Independent contractors, they get paid a flat rate. They're responsible for any expenses that are incurred. They're responsible for their own taxes on the job. They provide their own equipment. All of that is on them. They just get paid the contracted rate, and they do what they want with the money in terms of that. The other reason a lot of employers want to use contractors is they don't want to pay the payroll taxes that come with having an employee. And so something to consider, payroll taxes are something that's a responsibility of the company when you have an employee. Contractors responsible for their own payroll or taxes in terms of what you're paying them. Something else that's becoming, I guess, more important is the duration of the relationship. So oftentimes when you bring on an employee, it's sort of understood that it's going to be a long-lasting, perpetual relationship. There's no set time frame where you want something done. They're coming in to work on your business and fill a role. With contractors and properly classifying them, you're looking at a relationship that's often for a set amount of time. For example, you have a project that you need to get done, needs to be done in the next month. So you outsource that to a contractor who gets it done in that time frame. So it's not an ongoing, constant relationship. Another thing that is sort of a factor in this is exclusivity. So oftentimes you have a contractor, they are not exclusively working for your company. They're providing the same service to many other clients doing the exact same thing. They're actively looking to bring on new business and provide that service elsewhere. Typically with employees, the understanding is that they're exclusively working for your company, even if it's part-time employees who may have another job. They're not actively in the marketplace looking to bring on new clients. Contractors are. So improper classification. Lots of potential issues with improperly classifying someone. And I'll run through the classifications in a minute, but in terms of potential legal and risk issues, Virginia specifically has fines for each employee that you misclassify. I think it's $1,000 the first time you get caught, $2,000 the second, $5,000 the third. They also now allow for the individual employee who was misclassified to take legal action against the company themselves, so you could get sued by the misclassified employee, which isn't good. On top of that, if you get audited and they find out you've misclassified your workers, and they should be employees instead of independent contractors, you could be facing wage law violations. There could be unpaid payroll taxes that you're responsible for, I-9 violations. There's potentially unemployment insurance that you should have been paying that you weren't, which you'll be responsible for. And additionally, unpaid workers' comp premiums, where workers' comp is mandatory in certain situations. You'll be responsible for all of that and the penalties behind it. So it quickly can add up to be a whole lot of money. And so, you think about whatever you may have thought you were saving by not paying payroll taxes, easily is outweighed by all of the penalties and fines that could come with a misclassification. So when you're thinking about how to classify, there's a bunch of different rules from different state and federal agencies. So, like Virginia, Department of Labor has its own classification checklist. The IRS has one. Federal Department of Labor has one. It's difficult to keep up with all of those and the changing regulations, because they're, of course, not identical. There is a new federal rule that's going into place on March 11th that deals with classifying workers under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And so this is going to be a big push. In general, the government's opinion on workers starts at anyone who does work for your company is an employee. It's the burden on the company to show them otherwise if you get audited. So they'll start from the fact that everyone should be an employee. You have to show them, this person should not be an employee. So a couple things to look at when you're classifying somebody as a contractor or a worker. One is the opportunity for profit or loss based on your managerial skill, meaning if someone can move up, make more money, get a different position sort of based on how well they're working, that person's probably an employee. You're controlling how much money they may be able to make and what position or role they may have in the company based on performance. That doesn't happen with contractors. You don't control any of those things. And similar along those lines, what type of investments are you going to be making into this person or this role? Are you going to offer things like continuing education or benefits, time off, all of those things, bonuses? Those things are typically given to employees, not given to independent contractors. You pay contractors the contracted rate, and that's it. So again, the degree of control, which we went into detail on, how much are you going to be controlling, when and where this person gets the work done. The more you control them, the more likely they are an employee as opposed to a contractor. So I know I keep going to control, but that's a really important factor because people understandably don't want to give up a lot of control for positions and work that they need done. So another big factor is the extent that the work being done is an integral part of your business. So if you own a marketing company and you're hiring people to, consult with clients on marketing plans and tactics like social media or advertising, those types of things, those roles are integral jobs in a marketing company. It's going to be very difficult for anyone doing that to be classified as an independent contractor. And so the way it sort of works is no factor is determinative. So it's sort of a balance, like how much can you tip the scale towards employee or independent contractor when you're classifying them. And if you want them to be an independent contractor, you need to think about how you can tip the scale towards them being a contractor based on those factors. If you cannot get enough evidence, if you will, that they're a contractor, then most likely they need to be an employee. And the important one to think about is how integral is the work to your core business. I think that's going to be a problem for a lot of companies. A lot of companies are bringing on people to do work for their company that's vital to the day-to-day operations of the company and classifying them as contractors. I don't think they're going to be able to argue that those people should be contractors if you're facing an audit. Going forward, I know I said there's no determinative factor. I do think in reality and in practice, that will be a major determining factor for people. So like practical examples of how that works. A good way to think about someone who could be a contractor, it's usually third-party companies or individuals who are providing like the ancillary services to your business, like it's your CPA or your accountant or your bookkeeper. Not really involved in the day-to-day core functions of your business. They provide some ancillary support that's important to your business. It's also a specialized service that, likely you don't know how to do or don't want to do. And so that person can typically be classified as a contractor. They either are picking up other clients to perform that same service. They've got a registered business of their own where they're out there advertising, marketing, trying to bring in their own business. And so that way they can be classified as a contractor. On the flip side of that, and I see things like this often, you want to grow your business, whatever it may be. So you think, I'll bring in a marketing assistant. I keep using marketing as my example. And so you're like, I'm going to bring in this, friend of a friend who can do marketing for me and social media, what have you, who's out there promoting your core business, trying to drive your core business, and you're sort of controlling what you want from them, or what goals you might want them to hit. It's gonna be really hard, I think, going forward to justify that person is an independent contractor. I think they'd almost certainly have to be an employee going forward. So the starting point I would suggest if you're looking to bring somebody on as a worker is you assume in your head this person is going to be an employee, and then you sort of run through a process and see how many of those factors you can get to weigh towards independent contractor. And if you cannot get enough, and it's not a lot of evidence that shows this person looks like they could be a contractor, in order to cover yourself, I think you're going to have to classify people as an employee going forward. All right, that was fast. I think again, a couple of things to think about. One, knowing the difference between an employee and a contractor, and that just because you want them to be a contractor doesn't mean they can be a contractor. And I think you need some sort of system to properly classify them. It could be like a checklist. So, all right, I think I'm going to bring in this person as an independent contractor. Do they provide some specialized service that isn't integral to my business? Do they have their own separate registered company? Do they have an EIN number? Are they out there marketing to other businesses similar to mine to provide the same service? Am I going to control what they do on a day-to-day basis, when they do it, how they do it, all of those things? If you can check off enough of those boxes, you may be able to get this person classified as an independent contractor. But it's important to have that system for each role that you're going to fill, and sort of run through it at the beginning and think about how you're going to classify that person. Make sure you're not running into any of these risk areas where you could get in trouble. Audits are up, in particular on small businesses. The IRS has, I don't know, I've lost track of the number, a ridiculous amount of new employees looking specifically at small businesses, misclassifying workers and how they can remedy that. And all of that's going to come with fines and penalties if they find out you've done it improperly. So it's something to stay on top of, certainly. I understand the business realities of small companies in particular wanting to use independent contractors, but if you start to weigh the risk reward part of it, it can easily get expensive if you're not doing this properly. Okay. That's I think a quick rundown of it. Trying to give you like a high level overview, sort of how to start thinking about some of this. I would say that the easy answer to never having any issues with this is to classify people as an employee. It's not going to cause any misclassification issues. But again, I understand the realities of wanting to try and use contractors where you can, if you can.
Thank you, John. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is say goodbye to our Facebook friends. So I'm going to disconnect that so we can now open the floor to questions. And John, you can stop sharing your screen now because nobody wants to see that for 20 minutes. I mean, I like my branding, but I don't know if everybody likes it that much. So now we'll open the floor to questions.
I have a question. Hi, John. I am in the real estate sphere and we are mostly 1099, right? We're all contractors. There has been something that's been very popular the last few years called teams. So it's where a group of independent contractors come together. So you could be an agent, sometimes you're not, and they work as a team to reach a common goal. So you could have a buyer's agent, seller's agent, marketing professional, but we're all 1099. And it's a classification we use, and I just want to see if that's something that's high risk or what your advice would be.
Yeah, and so that's a good question and example to point up. So one of the things that they've been talking a lot about around this new regulation that's coming in March is how there are a lot of industries where the norm has just become using 1099 contractors. Real estate's a good one, like mental health field is another one where everyone just uses contractors. And uh, generally the feeling has been, well, I'm safe because it's the norm in my business. And they will never go down that road. I think they're trying to make the point that that's no longer going to be the case, and they'll start looking at some of these industries as a way to go after some of these people. I do think in the real estate in particular, the 1099 tends to work because you do have a lot of individuals who can control a lot of what they do. And like in your example, you're talking about people who are providing like a specialized skill that while core to your business, it needs to be done or outsourced by someone. And these people are doing it um, to other people as well. Like they're bringing in their own business, looking for other opportunities and things like that. So I think real estate, while they're pushing on these industry norms, is probably one where the industry norm of 1099 is going to hold.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Lizzie, and thank you, Tiffany, for inviting me. John, you gave such amazing nuggets. Basically, what I do is I'm a health and wellness coach and a life coach, and I'm my own employee. But this is interesting because I do subcontract. Like for instance, when I do my when I need to add someone, for instance, when I do my speaking events, if they need somebody, like for instance, I like a yoga instructor or somebody that I need to add, I do some contract out. So but they're not really my employee. So it's just when I need somebody at that time for that specific event. Um, One of the things that you said was, that right now, I mean, how does that pertain to me? Moving forward, that now I'm going to be this year so far, previous years, I did a lot of one-on-ones, but now that I've moved to Virginia from Southern Maryland, I'm getting like proposals for bigger events. So I'm going to be adding more subcontractors probably moving forward, to my events. And so this is really interesting for me, what I would need to do. So
Yeah.
what's your advice?
I think if you're talking about event by event and you can contract with these individuals, let's say someone to provide yoga for a specific event, it's a one-time thing. Even if you're going to use them for another event, but you can contract with them event by event. That person does other things, does other yoga seminars or offers yoga classes outside of anything they do with you, and in essence is generating other lines of revenue. Then that'll be fine. I think if you grow to where, or your model becomes something of we're a one-stop shop for all this, and people coming to you to get all of those things, and you're really starting to tell a yoga instructor where they need to be, what they need to do, that becomes more of like an employee relationship. But
okay, so this particular person, so for instance, I did ask her to if I have more events, would she be willing to, work with me? And she did agree. to be my one. So moving forward, would she be my employee then?
I think you can still keep them as a contractor.
Okay.
I think you just got to set that relationship up properly. Like you're contracting with her for services for certain events.
Right. It's not going to be every event because not every event will need that particular, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And I'm also going to be looking for, so I'm getting really busy. So I'm also going to be looking for somebody, like I was actually looking for like a virtual assistant, but that's cray. But for me for right now, but I am definitely looking for help. So that would be an employee, right? Like,
Yeah, an assistant is a good example of where people really try, like, oh, I'm going to bring on an assistant. I'll just make them a contractor. It'll be
right.
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
going forward, I don't know how anyone will justify that an assistant
Right.
is a contractor unless you outsource to one of these companies that provides virtual.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like I looked into the virtual assistant and it was just too much for me right now until, I mean, unless I, really got, really bigger. But for right now, it was just too much for me. I didn't have that much work yet, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And one of these interesting situations that comes up a lot is people use a service like Upwork. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You can like go on there and look for people to help you.
Upwork, you said?
Upwork, yeah.
Work. Okay.
So you can go on Upwork and look for an assistant.
Oh,
And
it's like
the
part-time. I mean, my biggest thing is social media. I
well,
I I have like the social media is just one of my, yeah, I have so many people that reach out to me and I don't have the time at all.
so things like Upwork or other sites that connect you with individuals looking for work.
Yeah.
The misconception is anyone you use off of those types of sites is a contractor because like Upwork offers a platform for you to pay through Upwork. But if
Okay.
you look through their terms, this is
Mhm.
my warning, they disclaim away anything about whether or not this person should be a contractor or an employee. It's up to the
Okay.
individual business. And I've seen this happen firsthand. You hire an assistant off of Upwork, you pay them as a
Mhm.
contractor. That person is an employee. It doesn't matter where you got them from or
Okay.
if you're paying them through Upwork.
Oh, so they will be an employee.
Yeah, they may be, is what I'm saying. You've got
Maybe. Oh, maybe. Okay.
individual.
Cool.
So, John, just to follow up that example, I have a friend who just started a company it's called like Innovagent, and she is a virtual assistant, but she's not a virtual assistant for one company. She's does virtual assistants, services, and they're different from every company for multiple different companies. So of course she's like always trying to get more business in that sphere. In that case, because she runs her own company and she's offering services to multiple different companies, is she a contractor then?
Yeah, she's a contractor. So one way to think about how you could um, classify someone, if you're contracting with a company instead of an individual, that's always a good start. Because often it's exactly what you're talking about. They're a company, they're looking for other business, all of those things. So if anyone ever questioned her, even if she's a company of one, which plenty of people are,
Me.
yeah, I mean, we've all, or most of us have been there. It'd be easy enough to say, no, I contracted with her company. She's registered with the state. Here's our contract. Here's a dozen other companies that she provides the same service to. She's pushing her own brand separate from anything that we're doing. So yeah, that would work.
Okay, awesome.
I will say this is a very much a gray area. There's no set criteria like we were talking about. There's a checklist you can follow, but again, no factor is determinative. And then if you get audited, you're going to be in front of an individual who can apply those factors subjectively. There's no telling like how one individual doing an audit could look at these factors based on another. So there's no surefire way other than making someone an employee if you're talking about like these individuals who are helping out with your business.
John,
Oh,
I have,
okay.
Oh, sorry, look at all of us. Had so many questions. Go ahead, Tiffany, sorry.
that's okay. I have 3 follow-up questions. The first one I think is a pretty quick and easy one for you, but it's a more of a clarifying question, which is, are all the states the same when it comes to subcontractors and employees? Because you were talking about the federal law that's coming out March 11th. So is this, it doesn't matter if you're in California or Virginia, the rule applies, correct?
The federal rule applies. The states have, each state has its own individual way to classify as well, which may be more restrictive than the federal rule.
Okay.
Like California, for example, is always in this because they were sort of the starting point of not wanting people to be contractors. They got slowed down because like Uber and Lyft and some of these like the grocery delivery place, they're all using contractors, and that, you know, they fought with California, but each state potentially has its own separate way to classify too.
Interesting.
And then the second question is, what rules apply for subcontractors who are not in the states? So I know a lot of people who subcontract with people across the pond. How does the government look at that? Is there any,
Yeah, that's tricky. The Philippines, for example, is a huge place where people go to get like admin or virtual assistance. A lot of times that is through like a company though, and so that makes it easier. But there are potentially laws in those other countries you need to comply with, and payroll issues if they're going to be an employee. I think that's, so on paper and technically that could be a landmine. I don't know that anyone's going to look into it at this point.
okay,
Can I ask about that? So I've moved to Richmond the last year. But I'm from Southern Maryland, and most of my work has been in Southern Maryland. And I've been there for like over 20 years. Now I'm doing work in Richmond and Southern Maryland. So, and the taxes are different. So how would that work for me as far as like, because the last year is going to be really different for me. As far, well, I didn't do a lot of work in Virginia though, very limited, you know, so it's not a lot. This year's gonna be different, of course, because I'm more 90% here. But how would that work for me?
In terms of like,
Yeah, when I,
what rules to follow, I think is what she's saying. Am I
rules to
following
follow.
Virginia or am I following Maryland?
yeah, Maryland and Virginia.
so for employees, you'd follow the rules of the state where they're located. For contractors, there are really no rules if you classify them properly. I mean, while each state may have their different classification, essentially they'll be close enough. I mean, it wouldn't be anything that like swings it from one state to another greatly.
And I really didn't use anyone last year. It was just this year. So but it will be this year. But I do work on in both states. So that's
Yeah, so the tax implications of that,
yeah.
in terms of like income taxes for your business, yeah, I don't know about that.
No, I'm talking about the subcontractor stuff.
Oh yeah,
because if I'm gonna
subcontractors,
be-
I think you could.
Yeah,
Subcontractors are fine. It's the employees, I think is what John's saying. If you hired employees,
hire employees.
then
Right.
you'd have to follow, if the employers are here in Virginia, you'd have to follow
Right.
Virginia law, but if the employees lived in Maryland, you'd have to follow.
Maryland, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
My
But
last, I have one more question. Because they all were going in tandem. So let me, one last question, and then you guys have it, because it's literally my last one. How does fractional services fall under the classification then, if you can't tell people what to do, but somebody's serving as a fractional CFO, fractional CO, fractional whatever role? How does that work?
Yeah, so typically the fractional work you can get in as a contracted position if it's for a duration of time, like we want a fractional CFO for the next year, or the implication is it's not permanent. Two, if you can show that that person does that service for another companies, or their model is they come in, they only work with one company at a time, but it like for a specific duration, like I was saying, and that's how they operate. I think if you bring on a fractional CFO who does only work for your company, doesn't have their own business, isn't looking for other companies to do that, it'd be hard to say that that person's a contractor.
So the caveat, because I know a lot of fractional people who've been working for a company for like 10 years, but they have like 5 clients and they do that fractional, they are okay because they have multiple companies under their own business.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. If there's not any other questions, I'll ask John a good question. Tell us about a nightmare. Oh, you have a question.
I have one more. I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm
no,
so
it's
sorry.
okay.
Maybe
No, that's
about
what we're
me. I
here for.
apologize. Okay, so okay, one more question. So and then I want to hear that question at the end of it because it sounded super interesting when you started it, Tiff. Okay, so my question is actually about a new venture that I'm starting right now with it's a sibling of mine, my sister. She owns her own company. She does a home servicing company. She's got lots of different things she does. And she is looking for other people in that realm. But for us, we are kind of doing sort of what's like more of a partnership deal. We want to start doing some deals together. Would we need to form a new company in order to work together? Or can we, share compensation under our current LLCs?
You could probably have some sort of strategic partnership where you're sharing compensation under your existing LLCs. The thing to watch out for there is if you're getting outside of what your current LLC does, then you're opening up some risk to your existing company that you could avoid by having a separate company that only does that. So does that make sense?
Yes, it's still in the real estate sphere, so we're just expanding kind of a little bit into different areas. But yes, that makes perfect sense if we wanted to go another way, that we would be opening risk. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so even if it's in the same sphere, trying to think of an example, but your risk is greatly increased, it may be worth a separate LLC. So like if you do, like if you do marketing, fallback example for everything, I guess. And you're developing marketing plans for people, maybe doing social media, but you're gonna expand into like heavy event marketing where you're serving alcohol, food, and all of that type of stuff. Now you've opened up a huge potential liability that you didn't have, and it may be worth walling that off in a separate company.
Thanks.
I was going to ask John. John, entertain us. Tell us a really good instance of a really bad mistake that you may have had been called into after the fact. So like you've witnessed something within this topic. They're like, oh my gosh, and this is what happened. Of course, confidentiality, we know that, but just like the story.
Yeah. So we've been off of recording, right? Since
No, we're recording for members right now, though.
So I have seen a situation where someone had a worker that they were using as a contractor. They got hurt on the job, like severely hurt, or racking up tons of medical bills. And so that individual turned around, sued the company, claiming they should have been an employee covered by workers' comp. And they were correct. So the company is on the hook for all of their medical bills and everything that goes along with that.
So it would have been cheaper for the company to have them as an employee.
Significantly.
So sometimes when you think you're saving money, you're not, right? That's true in all aspects. Whoever's thinking real estate right now, yes, that's true.
So that's another thing that I see a lot of information about. So that one of the things I hear is, well, no one's ever going to catch me misclassifying people. And statistically, the likelihood of you getting audited is probably slim just because there's not enough resources on the government level to audit all the small businesses. The more likely way you'll get into trouble is you've got a contractor, you part ways, and that doesn't go well, and that person just turns around and files a complaint because they're mad at you and they say, oh, well, I should have been an employee.
Mm.
And that's how you end up with an audit and facing all this other stuff.
One thing, does it make sense that when you're hiring a subcontractor is to just try to, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm making me think that if you're gonna hire some contractor, maybe make it a policy to only go, when you hire a subcontractor, only subcontract with a business, not a human.
Yes, that would be a good starting point. And you can keep a file, you know, like one of the things I talk to some of my clients about is, well, if you're going to hire X, have them send over their business license, have them send over their state registration, have them send over their EIN. They have to sign a contract, have them send over some marketing material they've used that shows they're actively out there looking for other business. So if anyone ever asks you, you can at least say, yeah, I checked all those boxes, you know, here's a file.
Good idea. Interesting.
And that kind of thinking along that line, it's something that it may have changed maybe just the last couple of years, maybe the last 5 years. Even DPOR. So for our licensing purposes, DPOR, if you're putting an LLC together, because teams are so prevalent now in our industry, they now require you to check mark if you're going to be a team or not a team. And then you have to write down the affiliated licenses, those who are licensed through DPOR, and list them. So I don't know if that helps a little bit, maybe for our industry, but I know it's a check. They've got some checks and balances in here now, because it was going under the radar until probably 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, I think anything documentation wise only helps you, you know, like we send a lot of information to our clients about classification. It's just like a checklist or something, for example, just keeping a file if you're using contractors about, oh, I have all this, I've considered how to classify people. You know, here's a specific file for this contractor. Here's the information I keep on hand to make sure I'm classifying them properly. All that helps.
Great.
If you have a subcontractor and that subcontractor is speaking with a customer or client of yours and they are representing not necessarily their business, but your business, is that posing a problem now? Because it's looking like you're telling them that people may be looking at that person as that you're an employee of that business. So if somebody's doing that should they be upfront like I'm third party and I'm with this company, but
I think they should be as upfront as possible. I think there are, you know, there's like third-party sales companies and stuff like that that legitimately would be contractors, but yeah, I think if you're starting to have someone do a lot of interaction with clients, that type of stuff, you're gonna have to look at that one hard. It's most likely employee.
I could tell you from a corporate standpoint, when I was a consultant and doing these things for a large company, we always had third party on everything listed, so it was very transparent. Feel like in the small business world, sometimes that doesn't happen, but I think there's a reason the corporations do it that way for risk management.
Yeah. Yeah, like independent sales agents, right? You hear about those in certain industries and they're 1099s. And I think it's doable. You just got to set it all up properly.
So can a subcontractor be an independent sales agent but only make commission?
Potentially.
That's always a big question.
I think it's checking, again, going through all those criteria and seeing how they fit in there.
As long as you're not just selling something for one person.
Yeah. I mean, like an individual who works for you and sells only for you is not going to be an independent sales agent.
Are there any other questions? take this advantage of this time because you got an attorney right here.
I'm just so glad I was able to get on. Some great nuggets for sure.
Yeah, it's huge on insight.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the things that you told us early on, and this, Tiffany, goes to kind of like your question, if there are any more questions. A lot of those things that you can just, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm asking myself, well, is the person the only person, and then I kind of disqualify my own question in a way, because it's given me the answer that I need, to be able to say, yeah, that person's probably an employee, So, good
Yeah, I mean,
stuff.
I think there are a lot of companies who want to ignore this altogether because they don't want to have to face the fact that these workers they have are employees, not contractors.
Yeah. Not really worth the risk, but yeah.
And it's interesting because this year I am growing and I know I'm going to grow. And so, being on this call for me is great information. So,
Yeah,
I'm glad.
the right
Good.
way to do it.
Yes.
One more small question, and this is I'm probably going to answer my own question yet again, but what about people who tie their compensation together? So I ran into a gentleman who I'm not sure how many companies he works for at a time at a meeting yesterday. And he's basically was saying, his success is tied to the success of the company. So he doesn't get compensated unless the company, he's working on organizational and management and things like that. So he comes in and he helps you restructure and all this kind of stuff. But his compensation is tied to the success of that company. And so he doesn't even really get paid until that pays off for the company. So to me, I feel like a contractor, but
Yeah, it's possible he could be a contractor if you set that relationship up properly, and that's what he does. He goes from company to company.
Mhm.
But I think if you went into it thinking, oh, I really need someone to come in here, help us get organized, help us with operations, be in the day-to-day, and it's an individual who's not working anywhere else, not doing anything else, doesn't have a company.
Mhm.
Tough
Yeah.
to
Okay.
they're not an employee.
Gotcha. Cool.
It goes back to, does he have his own business? Can you get his
Mhm.
union, all that stuff? Not, you know what I mean? It goes back to
Yeah.
that checklist. John, do
Yeah.
you have
And I
that checklist for social media? Do you have that checklist for social media?
Sure. Probably.
I need it.
Me too. I do feel the balance thing, because like in one instance, that guy would have control, you would have control over a person, right? But then that person works for themselves and offers other services. So you're kind of what you were saying earlier, like you got to balance that scale, like where do they lie, And so it is complicated. I get why people get confused about this stuff.
It's definitely
Because it's at the line. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
So it almost sounds like subcontractors are kind of like relationships. After living together after a certain number of years, they could be turning into something more normal.
Could be married.
Some common law. I mean, it is what it is.
He's not laughing though. We're laughing and he's like,
He's like, oh,
he's like,
he knows me. He's
Funny.
just, oh, not again. Well, thank you, because I want to honor your time, because we're supposed to end at 1:50, and I want to honor your time. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to shoot them to me. I'll see what John will answer them. Maybe he'll just laugh to himself. Who knows? But feel free to send me your questions. You know how to reach me. Any final parting words, John, before we say goodbye?
No, I think really just get some sort of process in place when you're bringing people on to run through how to classify them. That'd go a long way.
Perfect. Well, thank you, John, and have a great rest of the day. And as I always say, evolve together.
Yeah. Adios. Besitos.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.